KSI vs. Joe Weller was a pivotal moment in YouTube history, as it was the start to YouTube boxing as we know it. It was the first time we have seen YouTubers settle their beef in the ring and let their fists do the talking to settle conflict. It was a big spectacle where it was the first time that we saw two people with huge name value and a pre-existing audience enter the boxing ring and try to bring their YouTube audience along with them.
As the champion of boxing on YouTube, I am calling out for anyone that is brave enough to take me on.
The drama had first begun after Joe Weller had won a friendly sparring competition against his friend Theo Baker for a YouTube video, and then had claimed himself as the YouTube boxing champion, in which afterwards KSI had put himself forward to be his next opponent. Even though the two had been friendly for a while, they had started insulting each other on Twitter and making countless different exchanges. The result of this had caused KSI to create a diss track against Joe Weller titled "Two Birds, One Stone" in August of 2017, which had also been during the entire Sidemen beef, which took over the entire internet. During the upload event that was transpiring on September 9th of 2017, KSI and Joe Weller attended the event, which had also been live streamed to YouTube. The drama was already starting to begin when both KSI and Joe Weller crashed each other's panels, where Joe had come onto KSI's panel, and it seemed like the two were really starting to develop a beef, and as well it seemed like the fight was going to take place. After these events, there was a press conference officially announcing their fight. At the end of the press conference, there was a face-off where Joe had pushed into KSI, and an entire fight had erupted, and KSI was viciously trying to get to Joe Weller, where he is throwing security and even one of Joe's friends. On September 11th of 2017, KSI had made a video titled "Responding to the Joe Weller Fight," in which KSI had said that he's going to destroy Joe in a boxing match and he doesn't know what's coming for him.
And ultimately help me get to the point to where I fucking end your life in that ring.
After this video, it seemed the fight was officially on and it was going to happen, in which it was announced in February 2018 that it was going to be taking place. Both of these huge YouTubers had taken this very seriously, as they had both gone their own camps with their own training partners, their own coach, and they were all training several months for this fight, as we saw in their physique during the weigh-in. It was clear that this fight had drawn massive attention from different outlets, and the entirety of YouTube was talking about it. The fight was set to be held in the United Kingdom in the Copper Box Arena, and it was going to be streamed free to YouTube on KSI's YouTube channel, and being held as one of the biggest white-collar boxing matches of all time. Another huge aspect that greatly benefited this event was that many other huge YouTubers were also going to be competing on it, as we saw the first real YouTube boxing undercard with big names from the UK such as JMX, Anison Gibb, and many others. We had always seen on YouTube a lot of drama consisting of diss track and many other ways that YouTubers would settle their own beef in different ways. However, this was the first main time that YouTubers would be getting into a boxing fight to settle their score. And for this reason, it was one of the biggest events to ever take place on YouTube.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's make some noise for these two boys! This is it! Are you ready? We've got a fight!
KSI vs. Joe Weller was scheduled for 6 rounds consisting of 3 minutes each. And when looking at the tail of the tape, you can definitely recognize that KSI was the bigger man. He was taller, he had a longer reach, as well as weighing a couple pounds heavier. This advantage definitely showed in the fight, as we're going to be breaking it down round by round. Immediately right off the bat, we see KSI framing with his jab and using his long reach to find his distance, while Joe Weller was kind of in a tight guard, not really doing much early on.
Many times KSI in this fight followed up with many jabs with right hooks to the head and to the body.
Yeah, the jab was definitely the most effective tool that KSI was using repeatedly throughout the fight.
Something interesting to note about this fight compared to some of KSI's other ones, where he kept his hands down majority of the fight, just sticking to this kind of jab approach.
At the beginning, Joe seemed pretty hesitant, but whenever he threw, it would kind of throw KSI off, and you'd see a couple of flaws in his game, as a lot of the time, he was holding his chin in the air, not really defending himself properly, but he was able to do a good job of just getting out of the way of shots. Something in the first round that is definitely easy to notice is KSI was going to the body a lot, and that was a big game plan for him, as a lot of amateur fighters and lesser experienced fighters don't really typically go to the body that much, and so doing that early on is definitely something that is great to learn, and it was a great game plan by KSI and very well executed.
Joe throughout this fight was very much just head hunting it, and never really seemed to go to the body often.
KSI was doing a good job of just staying on the back foot, moving a lot, getting out of range, and using counters whenever he found openings in Joe's guard. You can see Joe Weller is kind of almost trying to implement a peekaboo style that we've seen from someone like Mike Tyson, where he's trying to avoid shots, and he does a pretty good job of sometimes slipping shots and trying to counter on his own from the back foot.
KSI's defense in this fight was not really there, as many times when Joe would throw, he wasn't as sure as what to do, which is common although it is his first fight.
And KSI was actually able to use the uppercut a couple times during this fight, as Joe kind of had a tight guard, but it was more around his face rather than actually defending his face, and uppercuts were definitely an opening that KSI took advantage of and saw it pretty early on. Joe is definitely looking for more looping punches and shots like hooks and uppercuts that will try to land on KSI, but KSI is just sticking to the game plan, using more straight shots, which is something that would be nice to see more later on into his boxing career, as he kind of adapted to throwing a lot of overhands and more wild shots than he did in his first fight.
You can see in this fight, compared to KSI's other fights, when he has the height advantage like he does against Joe, he's able to really use his jab effectively, unlike when he fought against Logan Paul, who was the bigger man. He wasn't really able to use it very well.
In the second round, KSI was lighting Joe up, throwing combination after combination, hooks that would land on Joe's headgear, and I think if they didn't have headgear, Joe Weller would have been out pretty early on in this fight. Second round, we see a lot more focus on the body shots from KSI, really wearing Joe Weller down, trying to get him tired as well.
You could see as KSI got more and more comfortable in there round by round, he really started to unload more often than just kind of probing with his jab as much.
Third round is where we really see the real KSI unleash, as he just goes combination after combination, lands left and right on Joe Weller, and does a lot of damage. And this is the round where he ends up finishing the fight. We even see a little bit of feints by KSI where he tries to trick Joe into some shots that he might not be throwing. And we saw KSI's cardio and how much he really worked for this fight really show. Joe Weller as well, he definitely worked very hard in this fight. You saw his slipping, his countering, he was moving pretty well. But KSI was just boxing his head off. He was on a different level boxing wise, and even athleticism, I think.
And you can see as the later rounds came, Joe Weller was not as confident and seemed to become more frustrated as time go on, as he wasn't able to get past the jab as frequently. And later on, you could just see KSI going for the kill, unloading, and you can see Joe get the standing 10 count.
And he ended up finishing the fight devastatingly by TKO. The ref stopped it after several 8 counts in the third round, and he really put on a performance that was the biggest win of his life, and it was a shocking statement that he really just took the world by storm.
Overall, a great first fight for KSI, where he really showcased some of his different skills, being his very effective jab in there against Joe Weller, good combination of different punches such as the uppercut, right hook, showed good body work as well, mixing it up with variety, not becoming too obvious and still kind of tricking Joe as to what to throw, and also just showing his heart and cardio.
It was a very good introductory fight to the whole scene, and the card was great, the fights were great, and it was definitely a great event that really put YouTube boxing into what it is today.
50, get a deal done. August 25th, we fight. Yeah?
KSI versus Joe Weller was a great match that saw KSI take charge and rise up to the occasion in a great underdog story by staying technical, staying long, and being disciplined enough to remain calm under pressure and outclass Joe Weller. During the post-fight interview, KSI took the opportunity on the huge stage and in a now viral moment where he had called out Jake and Logan Paul to a boxing match.
Jake Paul, Logan Paul, any of the Pauls, I don't care.
Which at the time were undoubtedly the most controversial figures that everyone wanted to see get beaten up, as the call-out came coming off of Logan Paul's controversial Forest incident. This moment was huge and an all-time high for hype. Everyone wanted to see the fight happening, and this call-out created massive buzz across the world as it spiraled and snowballed into something much bigger than anyone thought, starting with the Pauls responding and eventually infamously ending up getting into the boxing ring themselves. KSI and Logan Paul ended up fighting in a huge pay-per-view amateur fight, which ended up being the biggest white-collar boxing match of all time, drawing over 1 million pay-per-view buys, with the undercard being full of different YouTubers and celebrities that culminated in a huge event that took the world by storm and pretty much the entire YouTube world paused and tuned in for. This fight was the first of many, as it was the backbone and originator of YouTube boxing as we know it, and has changed the entertainment and YouTube industries drastically, as this fight took off and eventually led to all kinds of influencers from all over the world looking to get in the boxing ring, start fighting, and have all kinds of matches of their own. Now we are starting to see events like the YouTubers versus TikTokers, Showstar Boxing, the Creator Clash, and much more that are all events that stem from the idea of matching influencers against each other, and this trend is still going strong even to this day, with it being over 4 years since this event took place. The trend is pretty much bigger than ever, and now we're seeing Logan and Jake Paul catapult YouTube boxing into the mainstream, fighting people like Floyd Mayweather and Tyron Woodley respectively, bringing it to a much larger audience than anyone thought imaginable. In conclusion, the impact that this fight left on the scene was definitely very big, and brought a lot of eyes and attention to what has become a big phenomenon that is still continuing to grow to this day, and in retrospect was a great fight with a great build-up promotion to introduce the audience to what YouTube boxing is.